Welcome to our annual meeting of the Beverly City Council and the Beverly School Committee. This is something that we do once a year to share information about things that affect both groups. And throughout my tenure, it's always been, people have thought it's the cities versus the schools, but that's not how it is. We all work well together and we all want the same thing. That said, I would ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd ask Dr. Hershey to lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Doctor. That said, seeing that we are in a school committee, a school building, I will ask our school committee president, Chris Silverstein, to run through the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
So the first order of business we have is a middle school building project update, and that's going to be presented by Bob Gilchrist and Dr. Hershey. Take it away.
Gentlemen.
Thank you. I'm Bob Gilchrist. I'm the project manager for Agostini Bacon. Here with me tonight is Steve Agostini, one of the principals of our company. I put together a quick update just to show some of the progress at the site. Not sure how many folks have been able to get by there. You know, 2 months into the asbestos abatement and demolition of the project, at the end of February, it didn't look like there was a whole lot going on. But inside the building at that point in time, really the end of January, we had already stripped out the auditorium seats. All the wall finishes had been taken down. All the asbestos had been abated out of the building, and a lot of things were going on inside the building. And then the auditorium itself, as of yesterday, is completely down. We're working in the crawl space that was underneath the auditorium, breaking up all the concrete walls, all the concrete slabs, and loading that out into trucks. So what you're looking at here is just to the extreme left of the picture, right in this area here. That's the old entrance at the main lobby going into the building. And in the background, you can see the only piece of the building that's still standing as of yesterday is the gymnasium. So about a year ago, when we were looking into this project, this is what the main wing of the building looked like. At that point, Dr. Hershey and his staff were probably still in the middle row of windows. School department offices were still in there of April of 2015. And as of yesterday, the remaining portion of the main wing of the building was taken down late last week. And you've got nothing left except some of the foundations and some of the crawl spaces down below. Working our way around the building, this is what the gymnasium looked like at the end of February. This picture here shows you a lot of the sheet metal from the job as well. The sheet metal was taken out of the building, so you got ductwork, lockers, any of the sheet metal. We've been segregating and separating all the waste on the job and sending it out to recycle facilities wherever we can. So your sheet metal is separated from your steel, is separated from any wood, which is separated from any brick and masonry on the job. So this was this has all been hauled off the site as of now. And currently, as of yesterday, the only piece still remaining is the gymnasium. The old gymnasium does not overlap or interfere in any way with the new footprint of the building. So that's kind of our low priority right now. We're gearing up to backfill the existing building's footprint and start driving piles in April. So we're going to leave this probably for another week or two, and then that'll be down and that'll be out of our way. Inside the gymnasium, about a month ago at the end of February, we had done, or were working on starting the abatement. We had collected any of the old paints and stuff in the building were all segregated. Those were all categorized and shipped off site. If there were door frames on the job that may have had some asbestos in the door frames, those are separated and segregated. And then in a quick month, we stripped off all the wood out of the room. So all the wood flooring is gone. All the doorways are gone. The old wooden backboards are gone. All the insulation is gone. So that's getting ready right now just to be demoed to finish that up. Again, a shot from last year, in April of last year, as we were interviewing for the job, to get the job. This is what the back of the building looked like. I was on site a couple of weeks ago when all the windows were removed. There's a chance that the caulking around the windows could have been contained asbestos, so we removed those and contained those and bagged those separately, shipped those off the site before the brick and the concrete comes down. So that was just March 11th, just about 2 weeks ago, and that's what it looked like yesterday. The entire west wing, which used to house the building department and some of the other offices, is completely down, and there's 2 pieces of equipment on the site breaking up the concrete and loading it out to get it off the job site. This is the other side of the building, over looking at the cafeteria, is in behind the green dumpster. Again, another pile of, this would be aluminum, so any of the aluminum ceiling tracks and things from the job, those get segregated. There's probably a pile of wood waste and miscellaneous waste up against the building. And this was at the end of January as we were completing some of the asbestos abatement and getting ready to start the demolition. So about a month later, again, more piles of sheet metal and aluminum piled up near the building. And you can see the windows having been taken out of a section of the building. Again, about 4 weeks ago on February 29th, and as of yesterday, the entire section is down. So the pile in the front, the orange metal you will see is the steel off the building. So you'll see a main steel beam here. You'll see drainage pipe, and then some of the different joists and stuff from the building, all being ready to be loaded out and recycled. I think that's a quick walk around the building. Just over the next 30 days, our plan is to start backfilling the old foundation in the area of the auditorium, and we're going to start doing test piles for the pile driving towards the end of April. And in the May timeframe, we should be driving the production piles on the job. The whole job is going to get about 1,200 piles. Driving those piles is going to take about 8 to 10 weeks. And we're looking at finalizing a contractor by the end of this week so that we can get those materials ordered and keep that on track. We hope to be starting to form foundations no later than July 1st. And our next milestone after that is the structural steel for the building, which we're looking at Labor Day to start the structural steel for the building. So, any questions?
Mr. Ladder?
Just curious if there were any surprises that you encountered, and number 2, with the weather being so good, are you on track or ahead of schedule?
We are exactly where we thought we'd be with schedule. We had set aside just about enough time, the 3 months for the abatement and demo. Weather has definitely been cooperative this year. It's allowed us to be a little bit more efficient with sorting the materials and recycling things. On that, we're not ahead or we're not behind on the schedule, so we're pretty much on track to where we wanted to be. And you had another question.
Just if you encountered any oddities, surprises, anything in the destruction or what you were anticipating.
We haven't found any surprises as of yet. The only issue that we had was we had originally thought that we might be able to remove the brick skin off the building and dispose of that as clean material, but unfortunately the brick was contaminated with some asbestos stamp proofing on the back side of it. So once we took it off, those quantities and the costs were already included in our allowances. Other than that, things have gone as expected. With us being involved for the past year, we did extra investigations in the underground and around the building. I probably was in the building 20, 30 different times myself, walking through, trying to identify things and clean those things out of the way so we didn't have any surprises.
Mr. Ladder?
Just a question. I know the mayor's had a couple of meetings specifically about the buses, but I know when we did the high school, we had 3 or 4 meetings over the course of the whole project with the abutters and the neighbors. Are we going to move forward and schedule some stuff like that for the people around the neighborhood?
Yes. We've had some of that conversation.
Yeah, no, I was just asking in the larger
Sure.
group.
So, to answer Councilor Ladder's question, Madam President,
Yes.
we've started a dialogue with the neighborhood of Auburn, Columbia, Bradford, that part of Cabot, and we've talked about having a series of meetings as we go forward. The next one has just been scheduled for next week to have them hear from Parr, the traffic engineer, on the traffic study that was done and some conversation about our plan for circulation through the campus. Blaine Avenue neighborhood will be brought into the conversation soon because there are issues along the field construction and, abutting to that neighborhood. So yes. And I think my sense is we'll meet anytime it makes sense to. We'll meet anytime there's new information and at different checkpoints throughout the project.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And we keep in touch with the building committee and the mayor on a regular basis, almost a daily basis, and we're available as needed to participate as well.
Any more questions for Bob? Yes.
It's not actually directed to you, but I direct it to the mayor. Part of I think, relevant conversation is the Briscoe Middle School building and what's going to happen with that. And there was a recent announcement that a working group. Can you update the council on that?
Sure. Well, the first meeting of that group will be tomorrow, right here at 4 p.m. Present company, Council President Guanci, School Committee President Silverstein will be serving on that committee. I think looking around the table, I think Police Chief Alasher, who's here, will be part of it. City Planning Director Aaron Clausen will be chairing it. And so what we've done is we've titled it a Municipal Building Reuse Committee as opposed to a Briscoe reuse, because there are a number of issues that we want to put on the table right up front, as we will need. As you know, currently, we can't house all the city municipal offices at City Hall. It's not big enough, so we're in different places around the city. We're hoping that at some point in the future, we'll be able to house everybody under one roof. Now, that may be when the new police station gets built and what's currently the police station comes together with City Hall as one facility. It may be once Briscoe is no longer used as a school, it's determined Briscoe makes sense to retain as an asset and may be an appropriate home for City Hall and the police station and school administrative offices. Those are just a couple of scenarios. May or may not make sense, but the idea is to look at those three buildings, starting with an existing conditions analysis, which fortunately has already been done for Briscoe, because that was required by the MSBA right up front. So we have an existing conditions analysis for Briscoe that will be presented to the Building Reuse Committee tomorrow by AI3. Mike Collins, our Commissioner of Public Services, will present a similar existing conditions report on City Hall and the police station. So there are a number of questions that we're trying to put on the table at the outset of this process. And I know that the group will be encouraged tomorrow to keep those questions in mind as the presentations are given. There'll be a presentation by AI3, as I mentioned, a presentation by Commissioner Collins, and then Brian Dales, our finance director, will give a brief presentation on our capital expenditure plan, recognizing that the police station, the new police station, is on that capital expenditure plan. So we want to, keep that in the conversation. And then the committee members will be encouraged to give feedback and brainstorm a bit and see whether those questions as posed initially are the right ones, whether they should be broadened and so forth. So, and I can't really predict the life cycle of this committee. It's a committee that will start its work tomorrow, and when it's completed, it will be disbanded. Very talented people, very busy and professional people, and so my expectation is there'll be a number of meetings over a period of months, and they'll come up with some recommendations, and hopefully that will help to, help us to chart a course going forward. So, does that help?
Yeah, no, that was great. Have you announced the members of the?
I have, and I have done so less than efficiently. So we put them out to the newspapers. Well, I shouldn't put it all on me. Each newspaper wrote a story about this, and we presented them with the list of members, and neither paper ran the list. So we were trying to get it out there. I put it on my Facebook page yesterday, didn't manage to get it on I put it on my personal page, haven't managed to get it on the mayor's page yet, will do so. I've asked the newspapers to run something. They didn't initially, they haven't yet. So that list will, with your help, maybe we'll get it out to more people.
Okay. Beyond the individuals on the working group, has there been thought of a process to seek public input on this issue? as part of that, as part of the working group process?
That's part of, excuse me, that's part of why the planning director is chairing that committee. Because we want to ensure that we have that opportunity for input. You've got some good thoughts on how best to seek it, how best to receive it. Please feel free to share them with me, with Aaron as we go.
Thank you.
Mrs. Visnick?
Similar to Jason's question about public input, has the name been decided yet, or will there be any opportunity for the name, for the public to weigh in on the name of the new middle school?
The name of the middle school is almost certainly going to be Beverly Middle School. Where we have one middle school, we're building a new school. It seems to be what communities do when they have a middle school and a high school. If you have thoughts on that, feel free to share them with me. There's a conversation that has begun that will be ongoing about how to appropriately recognize individuals who may have had parts of one of the existing buildings named after them. How we might continue to honor the Briscoe name as well. And there are different ways to try to achieve that within the building or within the system. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, just following up on Jason's, to the mayor, will BevCam be filming any of those meetings for the public facilities
Kim's
planning?
nodding because we made arrangements for them to film tomorrow, partly so they can broadcast and partly because yes, the answer is yes. One of our concerns was to ensure that committee members, we have one or two who can't make tomorrow's initial meeting, and they'll have the opportunity to get a tape and watch because these upfront presentations by AI3 and Commissioner Collins and Mr. Ailes are going to be critical to kind of shaping the conversation. So yes, they'll be taping tomorrow, and I think it probably makes sense that they tape as many of the meetings as possible. And as you folks know, the meetings are all open to the public as well. Tomorrow's is at 4 p.m. It's really a function of the members of the committee and when they can get in the same room. Maybe that the next one's at 7 p.m. and maybe that the next one's at 7:30 a.m. I'm not sure. They all will be, they all will be, I'll make sure that people know when they're happening, and they are open to the public to attend. And as I said, we'll try to make sure that they all, as many as possible, maybe hopefully all will be recorded.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Hershey, oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, before we moved off of Bob, I just want to say that I've been watching the demolition of the building with great interest, and I got to say, you guys have done a great job so far. It seems to be a rather rapid and clean process, and what impresses me the most is the fact that a lot of the material that you're bringing down is being recycled or reused somewhere else, which I think is keeping with the sentiment that our community shares, and so thanks for doing such a good job on that so far.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Madam President, may I-
Yes.
because the conversation's turned away from you folks, and it's just, Bob and Steve, you are doing great work. Thanks for saying that, Mr. Manzo. And if anybody is interested in seeing where we'll be in a couple of years with Agostini Bacon, all you've got to do is drive over to Peabody and look at the Higgins Middle School, which they are building, and is a top-notch effort by them. Is going to be a great school.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Great, thank you.
And Dr. Hershey is now going to tell us a little bit more about the middle school and update us.
So Bob tore it down. Now I'm going to build it back up. So these slides are courtesy of AI3. I have license to change the slides any way I want, as long as I don't change the design. So I did make some changes. School committee saw some of these before, but I don't think that the city council had an opportunity to see that. So one of the things that I would note here, because we've had some conversation at the building committee, that looks yellow. It's not. We've actually seen the material, and the material is brown. So I've been trying to get them to change what that color looks like, because it's not actually the color of the building they're building. One of the things that we've done is we've spent a lot of time with the Briscoe staff, the 5th grade, and actually some high school teachers being involved at every step of the way in helping us design this building in a way that makes sense for Beverly, but also makes sense for the staff. We had 8 sessions, visioning sessions between September and November of 14. That was a large cross-section. We had 30 people who were involved, from high school teachers to elementary teachers to a significant portion of the Briscoe staff. And they spent a lot of time looking at what the educational vision should be for this building. One of the things that's interesting is as we're building this building, and it's changed since the high school was built. So the first thing that we had to submit was the educational program in this process. And then the building has to be built to match our educational program. In the past, there was a lot of, this is the building you're going to build. You know, we've got 4 or 5 different options there, and you're just going to build that building. And if your educational program works in it, great. If it doesn't, that's too bad. So this case, MSBA has really changed their process. So a lot that we looked at is everything that has to do with what we believe are 21st century learning skills, what middle school kids need, and also what we believe is something that will be the hallmark of what's going on in this building. So we looked at growth mindset. We know that the kids need to have a safe place to go to school. The additional piece that we talked about is it has to be a safe place to make mistakes. This is, we need to teach kids that it's really okay to make mistakes. You know, most of us who are adults learn from our mistakes, and it's important that the kids have an opportunity to do that as well. Flexible and adaptable minds and spaces, resiliency and high expectations. Schools without walls. When Troy used that term, it gave me a little bit of a twitch because we used to actually build schools without walls, and almost every one of them now has walls. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the indoor and outdoor walls that don't separate the learning and keep it within the confines of the building. It inspires creativity. We did a lot of talking about how that would actually be achieved so that the kids would be inspired and the staff would be inspired to do great work and to do high-level thinking. Indoor-outdoor connections, we have been doing that from the start, and the building has a very significant outdoor component to it that is learning. And as Judy Miller will say, she will build igloos in the wintertime if she has to make sure that outdoor space is also used in the wintertime. Experiential learning and extended day use. So one of the things that Briscoe has been hampered by is the ability to have kids there after school. So we've talked a lot about the end of the day and transportation of kids getting on buses and then going home. We're kind of hoping that the kids aren't getting on the buses and going home at the end of the day, because this is a facility that they should be in the afternoon. And great numbers. So this building has really been designed to be used beyond the school day. Belonging and ownership. Middle school kids in particular love to have something that they feel that they belong to and something that they have ownership in. And when they feel ownership, they are very responsible. So this building is being built to have eyes on kids of adults, but expecting that kids are going to do the right thing in general, and we'll find that 95% of our kids will do that. Universal design, making sure that it's accessible and provides great opportunities for inclusion in the classroom of all of our kids, and making sure that we have the ability to guarantee all kids a quality education. Community cohesion. We're all set up in neighborhoods and teams. That's not a new concept to Beverly's middle schools, but it is a building that's going to enhance that opportunity to be part of a community. We also talked about small school communities and large school pride. So one of the things that comes with teaming in neighborhoods is the kids begin to identify themselves with the team. They begin to identify themselves with the neighborhood. They kind of forget that they're part of a much larger school. So we want to make sure that we're conscious about making sure that the students have an identity as middle school students as a whole, and they're part of a 1,300 student school. And within the context of that, they're on 120 kid teams or smaller than that. And then finally, being part of that something larger has to be conscious, where you look at a high school, the large part is the easy part. It's getting them to feel comfortable in a much smaller, like freshman academy concept that we have in Beverly. But at the middle school, we really need to focus on them being part of the whole. So very quickly, we did submit a 40-plus page document, which was the educational program that this was designed around. During that whole time, we've had parallel work developing the program. So you may see some fairly tired middle school teachers, not terribly surprising, because they're right now changing the program that they have and making it better than it is now based on what they want to accomplish once the school opens. Developing a vision for hands-on learning environment that applies what students have learned. The entire district has been looking at project-based learning and how do we show authentic assessment opportunities. This building is built with maker spaces, outdoor learning area that is conducive for kids to be working on projects, small and large, and being able to demonstrate what they've learned in coming out with a project. Staying true to their beliefs, the Briscoe staff was very strong in their wanting to continue with the beliefs that they have around kids, and they wanted to make that as a statement. Much work has been done by the middle school staff, both present and future. So present and future means that the fifth grade teachers have been involved. We actually have done some open sessions where any elementary teacher can actually come and join in to understand what's going on in case there might be a fourth grade teacher or a third grade teacher that might want to work in the fifth grade at the middle school. So just to give you an idea of the flow right from the start. So the teachers really expressed that they would use the outdoor learning environment, particularly if the flow was very easy for them to go from their classroom to outdoors. And so this building was designed to be able to cause that to happen no matter which floor you're on. So you essentially are going to have your academic area, which is where the teams will meet. They will go through the makerspace area, and then we have built the cafeteria to be a learning area as well, and you'll see some pictures in the future. One of the things that drives all of us crazy is when you have a wonderful cafeteria that's used for 3 or 4 lunches a day, and that's it. So in this particular case, we see that as an active learning environment for larger groups of kids. If a team wanted to meet or if 2 classrooms wanted to meet, you've got areas to be able to meet. Faculty input. We've had 10 meetings. We had 10 meetings in the spring and the fall, full-day meetings with 5 through 8 faculty, staff, and departments. If you put a 0 on that, that's probably the number of meetings the administration has had at the same time trying to help get the design moving forward on what we're trying to do. The final piece is very important, so it's ongoing meetings. Everyone has been involved in this project, no matter who you are in the building. From Nancy Antolini working on the cafeteria and what the serving area should look like, to custodians talking about what they need from the standpoint of being able to keep this building clean in a very active environment, to all teachers. I won't say all teachers got what they wanted. That doesn't necessarily mean they weren't part of the conversation. And they have been part of the conversation. The other thing I would say, Troy Randall in particular from AI3, I think they were pretty close to giving him an office at Briscoe because he's there 1 or 2 days a week, meeting with small groups of teachers, meeting with the administration, meeting with cafeteria, meeting with just about everybody to make sure we design this building in a way that works for us. So just to give you a quick update, that's where we are right now. That's the primary building entrance. And that's the first floor, and at least at this point, that will be where the fifth grades will be. There are two cafeterias. There are two two-story cafeterias. The one on the first floor is a 5-6 cafeteria, and the one on the third floor is 7-8. So as we flow, we have each one of those are distinct neighborhoods for groups of kids who are working together, who have common teachers for their core, and they spend most of their day in their neighborhood. Then we have at the end of every neighborhood in the building a makerspace. So you can't do project-based learning unless you have a place to do it. And one of the key pieces about makerspaces is that when a project's going on, you don't have to break it down because you've got another class coming in. So it's an opportunity to finish a project and make sure that you're not constantly in fits and starts on what you're doing from the standpoint of work. The next is the cafeteria segments. Those are actually learning areas. There actually will be learning walls. So we will be able to, if a team goes into one of those yellow areas, they will have a projection device where they'll be able to throw up whatever they need to throw up from the standpoint of content and be able to teach and instruct in that area. And then finally, the outdoor learning environment. If you'll notice, the staircases are close, so everyone will have that same flow. It's just that if you're not on the first floor, you have a staircase to go down. But everybody has the same flow in this building to the outside learning area. And they were really looking at it from the standpoint of 125 kids, at least in the outdoor amphitheater. But in addition to that, they have pads where classrooms of kids can work together on a pad outdoors and be able to do the kind of work that they're doing around project-based learning. So just some quick where we are now. So that's the front lobby. On the right, that glassed area is the main office. What you see by those bushes there are glass areas from the main office. There will not be bushes that tall there because that glass is intended for people in the office to be able to see the front entrance of the building from the office itself as a security means. The other is that what I somehow think is a fishbowl. That green thing is not a fishbowl. It's actually 6 screens. And so it's the ability to display either branding or display kid work or display anything that we're trying to do from the standpoint of what does someone coming into the building see initially. And we want it to be seen as what the life of the school actually is. You also will see under the white lights there is a balcony. That is actually the second floor of the cafeteria, and you'll see a picture of that shortly. Should have made Bob leave me his little green pointer there. That actually is from the lobby as well. That's directly into the Library Media Center. It's purposely meant to be glass because we felt that it's very important for people when they come into the building to know the building's alive, to know that kids are there. In many buildings, you can come in and you sort of sit there and you don't see any kids, and at some point you kind of go, well, is this a school day or not? This is going to be designed that you'll know that it's a school day when you walk through the door. So that actually just gives you an indication of what the next shot is going to be from the Library Media Center. So if you take that, that's from the Cabot Street side. That looks right straight through to the outdoor learning area. So that's 2 stories there. On either side of that are 1 stories. The right is actually the entrance that I showed you before. And we all hate the furniture, so we're hoping that that's not the furniture we get. And then the left side is a quiet reading area. It also will be a media center for kids to actually be able to film performances. We've had some conversations with BevCam on how we can do some things together to get the younger kids able to be doing some broadcasting. So the next is perspective from the cafeteria. The red one you will see first. And that shows you the 2 stories of glass, and to the left there, that gray area, there's 2 of those on either end of the cafeteria, and those are learning walls, and there will be just some display areas there. And the next one is from the 2nd floor balcony down straight out to the outdoor learning area. If you go to the 3rd and 4th floor, those images are relatively the same. The only difference is from the 3rd and 4th floor, there's no access immediately outside to the outdoor learning area because it's 2 stories high. And so a typical academic neighborhood has 4 classrooms in it at the 5 and 6th grade level. At the 7 and 8 level, it actually has 5, and one of them is a science room. The maker builder space is at the end of each one of them. We do have distributed leadership as well. They asked us when we originally were talking about whether we would be interested in having our administration around the building rather than all in the main office. And it's really funny because we already do that at Briscoe. So it was very easy for us to say yes to that question. And it makes it much easier for kids to have access to the administration and for teachers to have access to the administration. That actually is a typical corridor. We will have windows into the classroom because, again, we're looking for transparency. There will be some sort of shading on it if, in fact, they need to close that off for displays or for security or whatever. But the expectation is that those will be wide open for you to be able to see what kids are doing. The other part of it is that if you look at where the corridors are, they're fairly wide. So the expectation is that kids are going to be working out in the corridor. If you get 2 kids who need to go work on a project and need it to be quiet, they can go out into the corridor. They'll have some furniture to work on. But we want it near where the windows are so that the teachers can monitor them without actually physically being out in the hallway with them. This is the maker space. That furniture is just meant as a possibility. What we do know we want is flexible furniture, and as you can see around the edges, there's a lot of storage because there's going to need to be storage of materials for the projects, also the tools necessary to be able to work on projects. So there will be tools in there will be materials in there, and kids will be able to go in there and work in full classroom mode, smaller groups, but there are 12 of them around the building, so should be a lot going on. And that's just a mock-up of the makerspace. Again, they're looking for transparency there. Those are movable glass walls. I thought the neatest piece about that image for me is actually the kids on the left that are using the windows as material to write on, and they're doing problems on the windows. So it's a very lively space. It's a very much active space, and you'll also notice those gray circular things hanging down from the ceiling. Power will be coming down from the ceiling so that if we're using tools or whatever anywhere in that room, they'll be able to get the power they need to be able to do that. And then the outdoor learning space. So again, this is just a mock-up at this point, but it includes an outdoor amphitheater, which you see in the middle there. Their intent is for about 125 kids to be in that amphitheater to see a performance. So that's a whole neighborhood. And it will be, you notice that it's sloped because there's about an 8-foot drop from the back of the building to the front of the building. So we'll take advantage of that. Those walkways also are where kids will be dropped off in the morning because the bus drop-off is by the outdoor learning area. And it's an area for exhibits. We did a brainstorming session with the teachers at Briscoe because we were questioning whether they would use it, and they came up with a list as long as my arm in about 15 minutes, to the point where it was very clear that they were going to have to figure out how to schedule the use of the outdoor learning area. But there was no limit to what they were doing. And some of it you've seen some examples of what's happened since that conversation. So the Socratic process and Greek mythology was actually happening in the front of Briscoe last spring, if you actually noticed, because when they had the conversation about how to use the outdoor learning space, the next thing you know, they were using whatever outdoor learning space that they could find at Briscoe. So that will be a very active area. It's got defined pathways to the building, particularly because it's a bus drop-off. And we have direct access to the cafeteria, so kids will be able to go outside if they have some time, either for structured recess or just to be outside afterwards, because there'll be places for kids to sit. The other piece to this is the entire building is wireless, as is the outdoor learning area. So they will be able to get connectivity out there when they're working on projects or whatever. If they have tablets or they have laptops or whatever, they'll be able to take them out with them, and they'll be able to do recordings. And then the final piece is just showing you a slightly different angle on the cafeteria. And then the Library Media Center, as you can see, was the shot that you saw before that looked out into the outdoor learning area. That little wood pad there is a defined area for a class to work and for a class to meet. So we think that there can be 4 or 5 different classes without the amphitheater working out there at any one time. So it really is intended to be a very active space. Thank you. Questions?
Councilor Houseman?
Yeah, Steve, I just had a quick question about your slide for the maker spaces that you referenced, I think, movable glass windows. Can you explain that a little bit more? I'm not sure I understand how that would work.
They're not
Very
stationary,
intriguing.
is what you mean.
Well, I understand that movable means not
I was
stationary.
joking, Scott.
Where are they going to move around to? Do they overlap when they move?
So you can actually see them here. So they're accordioned here,
Yeah.
and they're accordioned here. So they actually, here's your track for the glass.
Yeah.
So you can actually close this room off by pulling these accordions out to this corner and then this accordion out to this corner.
Very cool. Very interesting.
Yeah. But it'll, because the cafeteria is right here, so here's the corridor and the cafeteria is right here, there's plenty of area for kids to spill out and be able to be working on, if you're not working on the project right now, but you need to do some preparation for the project, the ability to spill out of that room and still be seen, I think, is important.
So it makes the rooms able to block off sound, but also
Yep.
open up, so they're much more
Yep.
flexible that way.
Yep. They're spending a lot of time on acoustics because I've seen too many buildings where the acoustics were not paid attention to, and so it doesn't work. So the cafeteria in particular, if it's going to be a learning area, it absolutely has to have solid acoustics. So somebody doesn't need a loudspeaker, doesn't need a microphone in order to talk to a group of kids. So that is acoustically sound as well.
Thank you.
Councilor St. Hilaire.
Yes, great job. I think it's really exciting to see a lot of the details coming to fruition. I was at one of the school building committee meetings, and they talked about lockers versus cubbies. Has that decision been made? Where are we at?
We're working on it. We do, go ahead.
We've spent lots of hours and lots more hours since the last school building committee meeting. It's a work in progress to get it right. Dr. Hershey?
That works for me.
What is the next step in that decision?
Yeah, fair concerns raised, and so we've kind of gone back to the drawing board with it all, and are getting closer to being ready to bring it back out to the building committee with, with
One
another round
Yeah.
of thoughts on it.
One of the interesting parts about working with AI3 is that I often say that by the time we're done having the conversation, we somehow have our cake and eat it too. And that's what we're trying to, they're trying to make the whole locker system work from the standpoint of what's realistic about it. We know that kids in droves don't necessarily use their lockers. We also know that when this building's been open for a couple of years, there's not going to be binders and books and stuff like that they're going to be carrying around, which is typically what's in, the lockers. So we don't need as much, and we're trying to work with making sure that we have the most square footage we can have in every classroom, as well as not interrupting the flow in the hallway.
I just add to that. So the idea is something lockable that's small, but big enough. And what are kids putting in their lockers today that they'll still be putting in their lockers in 5 and 10 years? It's a lunch. It's a jacket, although people keep saying middle schoolers don't wear jackets, but it's a lunch, it's a jacket. Sometimes it's their gym stuff that they'll put there for a couple periods and then grab and go down to gym. But as Dr. Hershey said, the binders, the books, they're going by the wayside as everything becomes more, technologically.
Typically, they're wearing hoodies and they don't take them off all day. And the other piece that, was worried about is boots. And any middle school kid who's wearing boots, it's a fashion statement, and they're not taking those off all day either. So, so we're trying to make it work.
Did you talk about uniforms at all?
No.
I'd like to see how the kids dress, and I have a 5th grader,
Yeah.
and he decided not to wear pants this year, so it's shorts all year.
Yep. And I lived for 12 years in northern Vermont, and let me tell you, the kids up there dress just like the kids down here do, in spite of the fact that it's below zero a lot.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, our next agenda item has to do with the opioid crisis that we can see almost every day when we open up the Salem News or the Boston Globe. It seems to be affecting every community on the North Shore. So to address that, we have Chris Silverstein, our school committee president. Then we'll hear from our police chief, John LaLacheur, and then the mayor will also make some comments. Ms. Silverstein.
Thank you. So when President Guanci and I were trying to build the agenda for tonight, we were trying to think of things that that we do together throughout the city, between the city and the schools. And addressing the opioid epidemic has certainly been a project in concert with each other. We work with the police department, and the schools are at the table, and many other people are part of this work that we've been doing. So everybody's pretty much aware that we are in an epidemic right now. And there's an estimated 4 deaths per day in Massachusetts. And math is not my forte, but that was pretty simple math. 1,460 people a year in Massachusetts die from opioid overdose. So relatively speaking, Beverly is not a hard-hit city. However, any death, in my opinion, related to substance abuse makes it hard-hit for the families and the friends of those people who've suffered from this. And I also think that Beverly could be a hard-hit city in the blink of an eye. Nobody who is addicted to any substance says they want to be addicted. Nobody plans it. It happens, and it happens. There's no demographic around it. It's happening to all kinds of people. There was a previous assumption that a heroin addict was somebody who was shooting up in a back alley, and that has changed to where many of us have been touched by somebody who has been living with this insidious disease. And so we've either known somebody who's lost a loved one, or we know somebody who's struggling with addiction. There was a Boston Globe article from last April that stated that more than 1,000 people died from overdose of heroin and other opioids in 2004 in Massachusetts, and this has devastated families across the state. And if you go to the mass.gov website and you look at the statistics, every single city and town in Massachusetts has had somebody die from opioids or substance abuse. So every corner of the state is contending with this crisis. And, so this issue, like the governor said, doesn't care about geography and it doesn't care about race, and we have a lot of work to do. So when we're working on this, we're hearing statistics about death. How many people die from opioid overdose, or how many people die from substance abuse overdose. But my question is, what are the statistics for the first-time users? How many new people are starting to take an opioid that they'll be addicted to within the next 3-6 months? That's harder to put a number on. It's harder to identify. So what are we doing to prevent first-time use? And everybody sitting at this table is a leader in this city. And I believe we can all make a difference in this, especially if we're focusing on preventing first-time use. Excuse me, can you hear me okay? So how are we helping people in crisis? And what are we doing to support people in recovery? And also, what are we doing post-rehab or post-treatment to help people to kind of get back into their world and, get back into functioning in a world that's going to be very different after recovery for them. So what are we doing in Beverly? Well, I'm here to tell you we're doing a lot, and some of you in this room have been working on groups with us around this epidemic. We have the Be Healthy Beverly group, which is part of the YMCA, and we are working with the SAPC grant, or the Substance Abuse Prevention Collaborative, which is it's Beverly, Ipswich, Raleigh, Manchester, Essex. I might forget one or two. But that grant is focusing on prevention, and it's focusing on alcohol and marijuana. And then we have the MOPSI grant that we're working with that is focusing on overdose prevention. So more of the overdose treatment recovery aspect of things. We have the Mayor's Drug Task Force here that we've been working with for a while, represented by the police department, the Department of Public Health, the schools. There's a lot of people at that table. And I know the mayor and Chief LeLesher will help me out when they come up here to speak as well and fill in the blanks for us. The Beverly Police Department's been doing a lot of work around Narcan training and making sure that people are helped with Narcan. They're also working with people, they're helping people when they have issues versus, just arresting people without anything beyond that. Every time I sit in a room, I was in a room this morning with the Be Healthy Beverly group, and Officer Panjwani was there, and I hear the same thing from Chief LeLasher, that there's a real commitment to help people from that aspect. The Beverly Health Department, I can't say enough about Teresa Kirsch and Bill Burke, but Teresa Kirsch, she is everywhere on this thing, and she really wants to make a difference. She's been working with our youth, and she's been at every meeting trying to help wherever she can and get information in the hands of people who need it. And the Beverly Recreation Department, Bruce Doig is there with us, and of course the public schools. There's a curriculum review committee that's working right now district-wide on taking a look at our current health and wellness curriculum and where are we with that, and are we current, and are we addressing the issues we need to address. There's a new substance abuse prevention peer group at Beverly High School. I'm not sure if I have the name of it right, but Pam Padavani, who's one of our health teachers, and Ann Flaherty have been working with the kids and doing some great work with getting kids together to just talk about this issue. And, what do you do when you're stressed out, and who do you go to, and who are the adults in your life that you can count on? And then the Beverly Public Schools Wellness Advisory has been doing some work around this as well. So some of the things that have been happening is we've had some education events for students. We've had some education events for parents. We did a youth risk behavior survey, and we learned a lot about where our kids are at with how they think about drugs and alcohol. Some of the things that rose to the top of that survey were binge drinking, marijuana use, and stress in general. So kids are telling us that they're stressed out. And so if they're stressed out and they're feeling anxious about things, what are we doing to help with that and maybe prevent first-time use? Where are we guiding them to be? Again, we're doing the curriculum review across the district, and we're hoping to see some changes in our curriculum along the way. There's been Narcan training, and today we learned a little bit more about an incentive to have Narcan, have our school nurses have Narcan as well, have the training. And then this SBIRT training is, it stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. And this is something that was part of the governor's opioid bill, where students would be screened, and it's just a list of questions. And part of the path that Beverly Schools wants to take with this is a positive approach. You know, if they are doing a screening and they're finding kids who have positive behaviors and they have positive ways of managing their stress and how they're hanging out with their peers and all that, then, you know, how do we reinforce that and how do we make more of that? And then if we come across students who, you know, are really struggling, where are we sending them and how are we connecting them to services and to people who can help them out? We also have a 24-hour medication drop-off at Beverly Police Department, so it's nice to be able to say that on camera so that people know if you have any medications hanging around your house and you want to get rid of them. It doesn't even have to be opioids, it can be anything. You can bring them down to the police station. And every year there's a medication take-back day. The next one will be April 30th, and it'll be at the North Beverly CVS Plaza. So if you have anything in your house you want to get rid of and get it out of the hands of anybody who may access it accidentally, it's a good day to take that back. And I know the mayor is working really hard on pushing for pharmacies to be additional drop-off locations for us. So it's not just the one place, and it's not, you know, burdening the police department so much. The mayor and I had a nice chat with the Secretary of Health and Human Services a while back, and, you know, we talked about all of the things that really concern us in our community and concern our kids, and, you know, how are we going to prevent first use, but also we talked about recovery and treatment and how do we support people through that process. We've had some community presence. We've been at the Gloucester Crossing event where we the Substance Use Navigation Project, which was part of Leahy, they came to Gloucester Crossing for one of the events there, and they talked to the parents about how do you talk to your kids about marijuana when marijuana is decriminalized and kids really don't think there's so much harm in it. And, you know, maybe kids are saying, you know, did you smoke marijuana when you were a kid, or it's an herb, all the reasons kids will say. The counselors from the Substance Use Navigation Project had a chance to sit down with parents and, you know, inform us about what are some good strategies around talking to your kids about this. We also had Officer Hathorn come that day, and he worked with the kids around safety issues and what do you do if you find a needle in the park, and, you know, things like that. And the kids, of course, were enamored with the police vehicle and all that. So it was a good day, though. I think it was something helpful for people. And we also brought a lot of pamphlets and things for people to take home. And Drea Rhodes, who runs the Gloucester Crossing Neighborhood Group, she relayed to us that a lot of people collected the information and had more questions. And so I think it generated some good conversation. And then we were present at Beverly Homecoming with some handouts and pamphlets, and it was an interesting thing to do because, you know, it's cross-community there. It's seniors and it's people with kids, and, you know, there were a lot of different conversations going on there. At Beverly High School, during registration this year, we sort of gave a boost to the Safe Homes program. The Safe Homes program is... it's sort of a contract that parents sign to get your name into a database, to basically say, if I host young people at my home, I promise I won't serve alcohol. I also promise that if another kid arrives at my home and seems intoxicated, I will call their parents and alert them. And if my kid shows up at your house that way, you'll alert me. It's a database so that, you know, when kids get to high school, they start hanging out with different groups of people, and you don't typically know all of them like you do when they're in elementary school. In elementary school, you kind of know all their friends and all the moms and dads. In high school, it gets a little bit trickier. And so this is a way for parents to kind of work together to say, we're going to keep our kids safe. We're not going to host alcohol parties, and, you know, we're going to make sure everybody knows that. We were learning a little bit a couple weeks ago about the district attorney's drug diversion program. That was something that the mayor brought somebody in from Bridgewell to talk to us about how that works, where, you know, if somebody is arrested for a crime and it's related to drugs, they're not necessarily, you know, incarcerated right away. There's a sort of a screening to say, you know, would they be a good candidate for a diversion program? So basically, they're offered treatment and they're offered services, and if they take the services, then the warrant kind of goes away. But if they go to services and then they don't hold their end of the bargain, then the warrant comes back on them. So it's kind of an incentive for people to seek treatment and to have access to treatment that they might find more difficult to get on their own. And then we have a great partnership with the YMCA that we just learned about this morning at the Be Healthy Beverly group, where there's an instructor that's coming to the high school twice a week to do yoga and Pilates with students, and it's sort of a way to help students relieve their stress and, have some conversations together and just spend time just kind of breathing, maybe. And, this is free for the students, and the hope is that there will be students who really could use it. I'm feeling like I could use it, some days. So are we making progress? Well, it's kind of hard to know if we prevented somebody from using for the first time. But these are our statistics from the mass.gov website. In 2012, we had 7 overdose deaths. In 2014, we had 4, and then we're back up in 2015. And just today, I heard, and Officer LeLesher can confirm this. Just this past month, there was a week where we had 6 overdoses in a week with 1 fatality. So we hear about the fatalities, we hear about the overdoses. It's extremely concerning to me that, and really hopeful to me that we can try and prevent kids from getting into this, or even adults. I mean, the average age for somebody to die from a heroin overdose is 25 to 45, so it's pretty young people. Anecdotally, we heard that when we had Chris Herron come to the school district, that there were several people who made connections and got some connections to either Recovery High School or treatment, or just by coming to the room and listening to him speak that night. So I feel like that's a little bit of a success. I always say if we do an event and one family has a different conversation about this than they did the day before, and they're diving into it a little bit deeper, and they're having some really serious conversations about where their child is around stressful issues and things like that, then I think we're on our way to doing our job. There's certainly more dialogue happening today than there was 2 years ago in Beverly, and I'm really happy about that. We have more connections. Those of us who've been working on this stuff, I have some personal connections, so if I hear of somebody who's in crisis, I know exactly who to send them to and get them some help. And then, we've been able to put some information in the hands of people through some of the events that we're working on, that we're doing. Many of you are probably aware of the opioid bill, but just that it was passed at the beginning of March, and it was designed to address this crisis. Pretty much it limits an initial opioid painkiller prescription to a 7-day supply. So gone are the days when you have your wisdom teeth out and they give you 90, opioids. It also sets an evaluation requirement for an overdose victim who seeks help in the ER. It allows patients to fill only part of a painkiller prescription. So if you only need 2 days for your wisdom teeth, then you can fill only part of that. It also requires schools to screen students for drug use and abuse. It calls for additional information on opiate use and misuse to an annual head injury training program for schools. So it's another opportunity for us to speak to our kids about this stuff. And then it launches a prescription monitoring program that requires prescribers to check every time they prescribe an opioid. So the doctor shopping sort of epidemic should help with that as well. So what's next for us? We continue to learn, and we continue to work hard at making a difference. We have a long way to go. We'll keep doing whatever we can to link people with the resources they need, and I believe we'll keep talking about it and doing what we can to inform people and connect people to the right resources and that. So if Chief LeLesher and Mayor Cahill want to come in and jump in with anything, and if anybody has any questions, yes.
I think let's do these first and then questions.
Okay.
Chief and me.
Good evening. I think President Silverstein went over a lot of, the information that I have, and I didn't know I was going to be here until about 2 days ago. So I'll try to go over a couple of highlights. I made some notes. Like was mentioned, we were awarded a Narcan grant through the Commonwealth. It's a $20,000 grant through DPH, and that grant is going to help us with resupplying product when it's used. We also have a memorandum of understanding with the hospital, Beverly Hospital. So once we use Narcan, that prescription is refilled by the hospital. Also, Pangiwani goes up and has that refilled by the hospital. But the grant's going to allow us to make sure you have continuous supply. Narcan has a very short shelf life. It also is temperature sensitive. So when it goes into the trunks of the cruisers, unlike things you can just leave there in the wintertime or in the summertime, we had to buy new bags for the cruisers that will keep it insulated for the use in the winter because of the conditions. And then we're also bringing the bags in and out of the cars more to also protect the product. Part of that grant is also further training because Narcan becomes part of the first responder protocol for police officers. But what we are doing is we're giving additional training specifically on Narcan to the officers so that not only do they have just a knowledge of it, but a really good working knowledge and being able to use it in a rapid fashion. There's parts that we put together, taken apart, put together, and administered. So the more hands-on training you can get with the drug, the quicker you can get it into someone's system. And sometimes it actually takes multiple doses of Narcan to bring a person back. So we're very grateful to have that program. As the President mentioned, we have a medicine take back coming up in April. DEA used to do 2 a year. They've gone down to 1 a year, and it used to be in the fall. Now they're moving it to the spring, but we do have our drop-off box at the police station. Again, we are working on multiple other locations. The Drug Enforcement Administration limits where those drop-off boxes can be. They have to be secured 24-hour facilities. They have to be monitored all the time. You just can't put a drop-off box somewhere and a random location where it isn't watched all the time. So we're working through some of those regulations right now with the federal government. Another program we're involved with, we're also on another grant with Gloucester, Danvers, and Beverly into the opiate problem. And it's a multiple component to that. It's been an education component, it's been a treatment component, and there's also an enforcement component. And we're going to work together with Chief Ambrose in Danvers, Chief Campanella up in Gloucester, and work on an enforcement component where we actually go out there, try to look for people who are dealing, take down the dealers, and then work the cases back. As it was mentioned, this last month was very difficult in Beverly. The last couple of weeks we've had now 8 overdoses, 2 deaths. The rest was saved by use of Narcan. And one of the deaths that happened over the weekend, we were able to start an investigation through the use of electronic devices and made an arrest yesterday for a dealer that came up out of Boston. And we're continuously working these types of cases. The detectives and the officers do a tremendous job. They work very hard, and they're going to continue to work those cases as hard as they can. There's a lot of law changes that have been also put through to the legislature this year. One of the big problems we have is with Narcan. If we administer Narcan on the street, if a person has an overdose, say, out on one of the streets, and we come up and we administer Narcan, or Northeast Ambulance administers Narcan, that person can actually refuse to go to the hospital. We can't place them in protective custody. So there's a bill put in front of the House. I think it passed the House and maybe in the Senate or vice versa. But we think that bill's going to pass where you'll be able to put a person in protective custody, get them to the hospital, because what happens a lot of times is Narcan brings them back, but the heroin or the opiate is still in the system, and they can re-overdose, shortly thereafter. So it's very important to get people to go to the hospital. Most of the times they do, but they can actually refuse. So that law being in place is going to significantly help us also to make sure people get into treatment settings. One final thing I'll talk about, and I'll open it up. We're actually working on another grant with Department of Public Health to try to get either a part-time or a full-time crisis counselor in the city. We may share one with Peabody if we can get this worked out, where they have half their time they spend in Peabody, half in Beverly, where they can actually go out and work with people that we come across, whether we, administer Narcan or Northeast Ambulance does. They need treatment. We know that they're in need. We can refer them to these counselors to do some follow-up with them, get them into Beverly Hospital, get them into another facility to seek further treatment. So we're hopeful that comes out shortly.
Thanks, Chief. Your Honor?
Thank you, Mr. President. So just to wrap on what's been said, I want to just take a minute to thank both Chief Olasher and President Silverstein, because their leadership has been incredible on this. And it's without it, we wouldn't be where we are. Chief LaLarsha particularly in working incredibly hard last year to make sure that we got Narcan into the police patrol units, and it's made a big difference. There clearly have been people's lives have been saved who would have died, but for those officers getting to the scene quickly and being able to administer the Narcan.
Yeah, it actually wasn't mentioned, but in 2015, we had 35 Narcan saves in the city between the Beverly Police Department and Northeast Ambulance. 35 was saved through Narcan.
Thank you, Chief. I also just want to say, I wish that the fatal overdose numbers in Beverly were as low as they looked up on the screen. Unfortunately, that's a bit underreported. As Chief and I have talked about, we had at a point earlier this calendar year, I think we had roughly 15 or 16 from last calendar year, but that's not a final tally because the state ME's office is up to 6 months or more behind on doing autopsies and finally reporting out. And even at that, some of the causes of death listed for somebody who dies of an overdose end up being something else based on, depending on, what type of condition they may have had. So I think unfortunately, it's safe to say that our fatal overdose numbers are higher than that and too high. We're working hard at it collectively, obviously, but we've got a ways to go on all of that. Back to the positive, the April 30th drug drop-off was mentioned. We're going to try to do 1 or 2 more of those later this calendar year. And they help, they make a big difference, but at the same time, having permanent stationary drop sites is what we really need. We have one in the police station, we need more. Beverly Hospital Leahy North has been working with us. They're trying to get to where they can definitively say yes and put one into their lobby. Working with the DEA regs and trying to navigate those and determine your eligibility and then follow them and find a safe place to station one has been the challenge, but Leahy's working with us and very much want to roll one out. And then we know that Governor Baker has been working hard on this one, and hopefully, from what we understand, hopefully they're close to being able to announce that 1 or more of the major national pharmacies will actually place them in their stores. It's been there have been some false starts on that. Last summer, it looked like CVS was going to be ready to go. That's hit some snags, but they're working hard, and I think it helps that Governor Baker chairs for the National Governors Association, he chairs their National Healthcare Committee. So he's really used that platform, and as I said, I'm hopeful that soon we'll hear that, and before too much longer, we'll have several permanent drop sites in Beverly in addition to the police station, because, well, it's not the only way people get addicted. Certainly a major way people are getting addicted now is through first becoming addicted to prescribed painkillers. So getting those off the street and safely disposed of and destroyed is critically important. Last thing, you heard it mentioned that the district attorney has a tremendous drug diversion program. It's essentially for people who are arrested, who are determined to be appropriate to put into this program. No dealer is going to go into this program. They'll be prosecuted. But if somebody's arrested for possession using heroin or some other opioid, and what they really need is help, that's what the DA's office is offering. So I've reached out and tried to support his efforts to get greater funding for that program and keep using those, trying to work through those channels through the legislature and the governor's office to say that, hey, we here in Beverly want to see more people who need help put through that diversion program.
Thank you, Your Honor. Any questions? Mr. Goodwin?
I had a question regarding the Safe Homes project. Where can families go to sign up for that?
I believe there's a link on BHS Online, and we were actually talking today about bringing it back for registration in the fall.
Okay, and do you have to be signed up for that to be able to see the other people in that database?
Exactly.
Or is that just
Yeah,
accessible?
you get a password and access to it once you've committed to it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew?
Yeah, it was just a question for the chief. You've been tracking the Gloucester approach to this, and, are there any lessons learned from what they're doing?
Well, again, anybody that comes in looking for treatment, we refer to treatment. We haven't had anybody come in and ask for, drop things off and ask for immunity, but certainly anybody, I received a phone call a couple of weeks ago from a mother of a 22-year-old that was addicted and wanted placement treatment, and I said, bring him in, we'll get him a treatment. Well, he doesn't want to go. So we can't force him. It's not a forcible thing. It's voluntary. That type of treatment is voluntary. So we will certainly, we have our connections through Beverly Hospital and through other agencies to get people the same type of help that if they come in. The one thing the mayor talked about and the president's talked about the DA's diversion program, that's when people are arrested for possession of, say, heroin. But what they do in those cases is they are bailed to and held at a treatment facility. They can't leave. One of the things that is very important is once they get in that treatment is to stay in that treatment. There have been instances where people volunteer to go into treatment and then leave the next day. So we want to make sure that program kind of keeps them in treatment.
Thank you. Good. Jason?
So what is the difference between what Gloucester's doing with their Angel program and our approach to someone coming into the police department and the district attorney's diversion program? I mean, what are the major differences between those? Because it seems like more and more, I mean, I'm just following it in the news, and more of the progressive police departments are following Gloucester's model.
Well, again, like I said, if anybody that comes in looking for help, they're going to get help. One of the controversies that comes up is, if you stop a car on Cabot Street and they have heroin, if they turn around and say, well, I was coming to the police station to turn it in, that's where that kind of falls apart sometimes. The Gloucester program, set up with people, the Angel program, they had people that would come down and take people directly to treatment, and the numbers are still out of whether it's successful. If they put a lot of people into treatment, I don't know how many people stayed in treatment. With the DA's program, they have a much better database on people that go in, they receive longer term treatment, and then they're released as part of their probation to stay clean. So
How does it work? Are we participating in the
if
diversion
someone
program?
comes in and asks for help, we will certainly make sure they get help. We'll refer them to a program, we'll refer them to the hospital, we'll get them where they need to go. So we will certainly help people that ask for help.
Okay. Have you talked to the Gloucester chief about, you say you don't know the numbers, have we met with him to try to understand how it's working?
No, we have.
What the numbers are?
If I could, on this, the district attorneys as a group, not just DA Blodgett, but certainly he does, they've got real concerns with what, with getting data from what Gloucester's done. And to date.
But it's not just Gloucester. I mean, I think there's over 100 communities now that have followed the same model. It's not just Gloucester anymore, as far my understanding. I just read something recently about it.
Yeah, why don't you and I talk offline, maybe you can show me what you've seen, but
Okay.
What we know is that Gloucester kind of blazed the trail.
Yes.
I know that Brockton has been trying to roll one out. I don't know of other communities that have actually, instituted the type of program that Gloucester's done. As I said, right now there's a pretty loud public disagreement going on between the district attorneys around the state and communities like Gloucester, certainly with what Gloucester's doing. They've been trying to get data and information from Gloucester, and to date, last time I read anything on it was about a week ago, but to date they had not been able to get at that kind of data. The DA's drug diversion program is a great program, and we want to support it any way we can. It does at the same time kick in when somebody's been arrested. And what Gloucester's trying to do is trying to step in front of that, right?
Right.
So one of the reasons I went and met with the DA, and then we got more information on his program, and we had Mark Kennard with Bridgewell come and meet with us, and we're going to, we're digging more into that, is to determine how much more we can take advantage of that than we currently are. As I said, the concerns with Gloucester are the effectiveness, the ways in which it could interfere with law enforcement in the criminal justice system. Chief mentioned one. There was a case in district court in Salem not too long ago where a defense attorney got up and said, my defendant who was arrested in Salem for shoplifting and breaking into cars in a parking lot was just trying to get train money to get up to Gloucester to turn himself in for treatment. So it's made its way into the criminal justice system as a defense. So there's a lot to this, and I'm not satisfied that the drug diversion program in the DA's office is enough, because, as I said, it kicks in at point of arrest, but it is a great program, we want to support it. The question is, what more can we do beyond that that doesn't undermine what the criminal justice system is doing and what law enforcement is doing is the challenge. So we don't have the answer yet, we're working at it, you know?
So are we participating in the diversion program?
Absolutely.
I don't know how it works, that's why I'm asking.
People from Beverly who may get arrested, or people who get arrested in Beverly, all those cases go, to district court in Essex County. So there's an intake process in the DA's office for the drug diversion program. And they will invite somebody to participate.
So they make the decision on whether or not they're a good candidate for treatment or
correct.
Otherwise.
And I don't want to overly simplify it, but I think if it's somebody who doesn't have a record already, if it's somebody who's not dealing, if it's somebody who the sense is that they're struggling with addiction, that in that instance, they're offered the opportunity and they're really encouraged to take that opportunity to avoid prosecution by going into treatment.
Okay. Have we talked to anyone in Gloucester about the program?
Well, I talk with the chiefs monthly.
Okay.
And again, I know a case where a family, had a young daughter that contacted one of the captains, and he made arrangements and got her into treatment. So again, we do get, if people come and ask for help and they bring someone in, we will get them to treatment.
It's just such a scary issue because it hits, it's probably, I'm sure it's hitting all of us, and you just never know who it's going to hit next. And it seems like daily you read something about somebody locally being affected by it in horrible ways. So it's just a issue that, the work that you guys are doing is unbelievable. I mean, thank you for your commitment to it. I went to the Chris Herron presentation, and it was just mind-boggling to me.
Right. We're going to talk about, this coming Tuesday night, April 5th, here at 7 o'clock, is a citywide PTA meeting, and I'll be speaking along with Officer Hathorn. We're going to go over a bunch of topics on safety and drugs and alcohol. And again, something that's forgotten is this is not a prescription. A lot of it, when you get into this, is not a prescription grade drug. Heroin was street made. Fentanyl is street made. It's not mixed in laboratories, and you don't know what you're going to get from one dose to another, and that's where a lot of the overdoses come from. You may have someone that uses heroin, but this one time they get too much fentanyl in it, and that's when you have the overdoses and the deaths, and that's why it's such a dangerous thing right now.
Yeah, I just think it's so important to prioritize treatment over punishment with this, because if you focus on the punishment, it just reoccurs, and the end isn't always what we want. So, thank you.
Let's go to Councilor Frades and then Councilor Houseman and Mr. Milady.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question about that legislation that's very interesting about the refusal to go into the hospital on the Narcan. Have they ever considered taking it a step further? In other words, if someone in the community, the police, the fire, or even your agent, the Northeast Ambulance, administered Narcan, wouldn't that trigger an automatic treatment plan? That just seems to make sense to me. I don't know if that was ever discussed.
Again, that's something we can bring up with the legislators. Normally, we have a couple of meetings with the legislators each year through. I'm part of Major City Chiefs and also Essex County Chiefs, and that's something I can bring up to the representatives. I'll talk to Representative Parasella and some of the others I know.
Some of the emergency medical people were with us this morning, and they were saying that if they come on a scene after 911 was called and they administer Narcan, it's far easier to direct that person and talk to their families about treatment. But if the person is administered Narcan by a family member in the home and the EMS people show up, they're not administering any treatment, so they really can't force anybody to leave or do anything different.
And the reason I say it is one of the better things that the chief does is that crime report. So in that crime report, you see a lot of the same faces coming back, Narcan. Just a thought.
Scott?
Yeah, Chief, it sounds like it's perhaps fair to say that you and the mayor have a skepticism or maybe a somewhat philosophical difference in point of view between how to handle the issue in Beverly versus Gloucester. Is that fair in sort of a broad brush?
Well,
statement?
yeah, it is because we're again still trying to get some data and see how successful the program is. But I think what Chief Campbell has done is a great job with getting people into treatment, and I think that's the main goal. And again, like I've said, if someone comes in to us looking for treatment, we will refer them. We will get them some treatment. I think that the other side of it, once we've made an arrest and they get into the DA's diversion program, they're also going to get treatment. So I think that we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, but on the other side, people aren't coming forward looking for help, so we have to look at every way we can get people treatment.
So your statement actually was my next question, which was, it doesn't seem to me that we can arrest our way out of this problem, which is why I agree with Councilor Silva that treatment is the way to go. Prevention, obviously, first is the best step if it can be, stopped from the get-go.
Right, but even part of the Angel program, those people are coming into the police station requesting help. They're not being picked up off the street and taken, given treatment, so.
So my understanding, actually, PBS Novus has a fantastic, I don't know the name of the program. I don't know, Chris, do you know the name of it offhand? They have a fantastic program on this and treatment. One of the things I learned from that program is that most of the time, if someone, even if they want treatment and they go into treatment, the failure rate is way over 50% for the first time. Most people who succeed in finally kicking the addictions go through treatment 3, 4, 5 times anyway before they can actually successfully get out. So I think what I heard from you was a certain level of maybe cynicism about, well, we get people into treatment, but they just come right back out. So from your perspective, if someone's failing treatment 1, 2, 3 times, is that a reason for not going down the road towards treatment as opposed to more enforcement?
No. What I'm saying is that because it's not mandated court-ordered treatment, they can opt to leave. And what happens is if they come back and ask for more help, they're given more help. And I know there's a study that takes multiple months for the higher success rate, not just a 28-day program, but it's multiple months to break the opioid the epidemic, the addiction. So I'm not saying that we may send people, if they want to go 4 or 5 times, I'd rather have them in treatment than on the street using. And it may take multiple times. But I'm just saying the difference is with the court-ordered one, there's probation over them, there's longer time treatment to the people who are arrested and put on that diversion program.
So, not to belabor it, but from your point of view, treatment coinciding with enforcement is a better route to go from your perspective than
That's what we're all doing. I mean, Gloucester's doing the same thing. They're arresting people also. I mean, don't think that everybody in Gloucester doesn't get arrested. It's a multi-tier way of attacking the problem. One solution is not going to do it.
All of the above.
Absolutely.
And
understanding,
Sure, thank you.
sorry.
Oh, that's-
Understanding treatment and recovery also means understanding relapse. And, the governor's opioid bill does include more treatment beds, longer stays for people, and a change in especially how women are incarcerated and offered treatment. So if you get a chance to read through that bill, there's a lot of good that's happening. Still, somewhat inadequate because the epidemic is so huge, but understanding recovery, and we talked to Secretary Scudders about that too, we really need to, learn and work more with relapse, That's why I talk about supporting people after treatment.
Yeah, well, certainly, just having a community discussion about the subject, as you mentioned in your presentation, the more we talk about this, the less the stigma there is about it, the more the awareness there is, and the more opportunity to actually respond in a productive way to it. So thank you for your work.
This conversation is getting good because we're talking about all the layers and we're a room full of thoughtful people, and we all recognize that it is a multi-tiered approach. The DA's drug diversion program that also anticipates and accommodates relapse because it's real. Mark Kennard is actually a longtime Beverly resident, some of you know, who's the executive director at Bridgewell. And he walked us through what happens in their program, and they do have relapse, and they have people who struggle. And as long as they get back on, I get back on board and try to work the program, then, that's, the DA's office is really hands-off as long as Bridgewell's working with them. As far as what's gone on in Gloucester to date, and Councilor Silva, thank you for the text. So we recognize that it's starting, the Gloucester model is starting to pick up steam across the country. I think in state, there's only, that I know of, Brockton's the only other community in Massachusetts that's going that route. It's not that we don't want to get people into treatment. It's not that we don't want to find ways to help people short of arrest. I think there's enough that's still being sorted out with what's going on in Gloucester that we haven't dove all in with doing it the same way they're doing it. That's not to say that a lot of what they're doing isn't good, because they are getting people to treatment. They're getting financial backing that helps finance treatment for people who can't get the insurance coverage to do so. So we're looking at it all very interestedly. At the same time, we're trying to work in partnership with our partners in law enforcement, and there is currently a real strong difference of opinion at the state level on the Gloucester model. So we're working to try to sort through it, and as we do, and please partner with us on it. We'll look for every opportunity we can to get people into treatment.
You want to wrap it up?
That's a lot of pressure. Well, it's a non-Gloucester question, so that might make you happy. The school where I work at, they just started a program called Text a Tip, which my kids sarcastically call the NARC hotline. But according to my assistant principal, they've actually had some meaningful tips, and there's been some follow-through on it. So I was curious, can you explain to us, like, if there's a kid at the middle school or the high school, and they're concerned about a friend or concerned about a parent, what do they know that they can do, that we have a safety net for them and their families?
Well, I mean, we have an app that is linked into our website, but a mobile app that you can text tips in also. And any tip we get, we follow through with. Again, if it's a very young person like that, we're to get the school involved, we're to get the nurses involved, we're going to get the Department of Health involved, and find out exactly what we can do to get that person help. There's a lot of different types of tips, and whether it's someone that's dealing and where they're dealing. A lot of times we get tips of houses, people dealing out of houses, or they're suspected to be dealing out of houses, and we follow up on all of those. So we encourage people to send in tips. If they want to send them in anonymously, they can. They do come in anonymously, and but we'll follow up on it to make sure that no one's in danger. Obviously, always the number one priority is public safety. Whether it's someone getting into treatment, someone getting help, someone getting counseling, or being able to follow up with down the road and looking for dealers and working those cases back.
Something that the students know exists.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll make sure they know.
Yeah. And we have a resource officer at the high school and the middle school, so we can talk to him about getting that word out to kids too.
Great, good discussion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item has to do with affordable housing, and we're very lucky to have Harbor Light Community Partners based here in Beverly, and Andrew DeFranza is the executive director, and he's here along with our city planning director, Aaron Clausen. And last month, they came by and they talked about a possible 40R project that would help with affordable housing. And we thought it was a good agenda item to have here at our joint meeting. So I would turn it over to Mr. Clausen, our planning director, and Mr. DeFranza from Harbor Light Community Partners. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Again, I'm Aaron Clausen, the planning director for the city of Beverly. I thought I'd just start with a brief overview of what 40R is and what it means. 40R is a section of Mass General Law that is what I would call kind of an addendum to or an add-on to 40A, which is the zoning act that enables communities throughout Massachusetts to implement zoning regulations. It essentially creates the rules of the road for which communities can apply them. 40R was established by Massachusetts, I think, around 8 to 10 years ago. It's been in Massachusetts since I've been around here, and the idea was to create an incentive for communities to adopt smart growth zoning and encouraging higher densities of housing in areas where there's services and utilities, infrastructure, oftentimes public transit, to ensure that development was following smart growth principles. And part of that incentive is to give two kind of, on the front end, two incentives, financial incentives to the communities. So there's a planning grant that happens once an overlay zoning district is established that is essentially, it's tiered to the number of housing units that are enabled through this new zoning district. And it's usually an overlay above your existing zoning. So you have your zoning regulation, and then you overlay this on top of it. So any new housing unit that's allowed by right, meaning it's not a discretionary permit that either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals grants. It's a by right process, usually issued through site plan review. Each additional unit allows unrestricted funding to the community. So if there's, say, between 25 to 100 units that are allowed through the zoning change, $75,000 is granted to the city or that community in an unrestricted manner. Once that has been adopted, the city gets that money. Following construction, so as soon as a project that is permitted through that process, once it's permitted through that process, there's $3,000 per dwelling unit that's created that's also then granted to the city. So in that example, if you have 50 units, you would have an additional $150,000 unrestricted for the community to utilize. So the financial incentive was created to encourage communities to adopt this. There's a couple, I don't want to say caveats, but there's a couple of requirements for which the communities have to implement within that zoning. One of them, which is up to actually a minimum of 20% of the units, the housing units that are created, have to be affordable at 80% of the area median income. So, for context, the City of Beverly has an inclusionary zoning ordinance. We require for any multifamily project over 10 units to provide 12% of those units at 80% AMI. This increases that a little bit to 20. So there's that requirement. The idea is that not only are we creating more housing units at a market rate, we're creating housing units to more of the middle income residents in the Commonwealth. The second part of that is that those units have to be allowed by right. Many communities in Massachusetts require multifamily projects by special permit. It's discretionary, and it's very much a challenge for developers, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, to go through that process in an effective manner. The state at the time, and I think the state is still dealing with this issue, so many communities have put up roadblocks by using this special permit process that it's a challenge to create new housing, and it's really become a housing crisis, particularly in eastern Massachusetts. So the other caveat to this is that beyond the affordability element to it, it has to be by right, so that a developer knows and has some surety as they enter the process that they're going to be able to get the kind of project they want. And what I mean by right is that there is project review. Typically, like I said, it's a site plan review process. The planning board typically is the site plan review authority. Reviews the project and can approve it or approve it with conditions. They can mitigate the impacts of that project, but they cannot deny it. It has to, as long as the project meets the standards of that zoning, it is approved. So it provides a lot of surety for the developer, and that's very important, as I'm sure Andrew can tell you, that even though there's not a lot of cost at the early stages of development, that uncertainty is a huge factor in whether or not a project moves forward. So just broad brushstrokes, that's what 40R is. The additional element that is really critical, I think, in our case, and is important to many other communities that are in more suburban context, is there was an additional add-on called 40S. And this is a reimbursement payment that are made to communities that adopt and create units through this 40R process that are bringing new students to schools. So in essence, the additional cost that is brought to the school and to the city will refund that and repay that on a per pupil basis. Did I say the city? The state. Thank you. Thank you. The state refunds the city for the additional cost. Thank you. So that's an important element to this. Early on when this legislation was adopted, communities weren't really adopting or were not utilizing this for fear of the additional cost of bringing new students to schools. 40S was established by the state to allay that concern. So I'll leave it at that and maybe let Andrew talk about the specific project and we can answer your questions.
Yeah, Andrew, why don't you follow this up with how this would affect an organization like yours? Or help, I'm
Sure.
sorry, not affect.
Sure. Effects, okay. Yeah. So it's nice to be here. So thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, city councilors, committee members. It's a little stressful to sit that close to a superintendent for that long from where I come from. So I did well, and I didn't get in any trouble. So it was, wow, there you go. See, I have a certain look, so it's hard to shake. So I'm Andrew DeFranza. I'm from Harbor Light Community Partners. We run a number of the buildings you may be familiar with. Turtle Creek, Turtle Woods, Harbor Lighthouse, some of the others. I'm a very proud Ward 2 city resident for Councilor Rand. And I've been working in a lot of other communities lately, and it's nice to be home. So that's an understatement. So how it would affect somebody like us, or what we're proposing, or whatever you'd like to talk about. I know the hour's late, so I'm happy to be as brief as you like. So the good part about this is it sets up zoning parameters, as Aaron said, that would tell us in advance what can and can't happen in a particular location, generally in a location where that's not already allowed. One of the dominant problems on the North Shore is that siting buildings, particularly affordable housing buildings, is incredibly difficult. Siting anything is hard because we're such a built-out area, but our zoning regulations at a state level, because they're different by every municipality, make it very complicated, incredibly expensive and risky, and hard to find land to do anything, doubly hard to find land to do affordable housing, for reasons we could discuss if you liked. So something like this gives a certain set of locations, or location, could be a broad area, where we would know in advance buildings have to be like this, they have to be this high, they can't be bigger than X. There's a variety of parameters, but you know what you can and can't do. So you're not asking for any special permission to any particular zoning law. You know what the spec is. You design buildings to meet that spec, and that allows you then to go through a development process that, while still fairly significant as a lift, is possible. You know what the end's going to be, so you can get there, which is not always the case. Sometimes we start a process and you don't know what the end's going to be, and it's incredibly risky on the front end. And I'm doing that now, at least in one place and maybe another. So that's what it allows us to do. I can describe what we're looking at if people wanted that, but it's up to you. Yes? Okay. So we're considering a parcel at the moment. It would be important to note at this point, as I think we've noted other times, that we do not have site control of this parcel. So that may sound pretty boring to you, but it means a lot to us. So we don't have site control yet. We're working on it. I hope that we're going to be able to report that we do, but we don't at this point. So the site that we're looking at is just up the street, actually, is the corner of Sawyer and Tozier. There's a wedge of land there just back from the North Shore Consortium, about 5 acres. Every time I tell somebody who's from Beverly, there's 5 acres there, everybody says, no, that can't be. There can't be 5 acres up there. But there is. There's about 5 acres up there, and it's in a triangle roughly like this. So we proposed an idea. We went with our architect, Thad Samasko, who many of you know, said, what could we fit in here that would work? And we proposed essentially a 60-unit building that would have, it's actually 61 units, that would have 21 one-bedroom units, 22 bedroom units, 23 bedroom units. And there would be income tiering in those based on financing from the state. And of the 40 multi-bedroom units, meaning the 42s and 3s, there would be a set aside in that box for homeless families, 12 homeless families. So as a part of the effort to diminish the use of motels and increase long-term permanent supportive housing, this would be part of the overall state commitment, particularly from the governor's office in that regard. So that's the project that we have in mind at the moment specifically. As Aaron described, the regulations from 40R and 40S do a lot, both in the permitting side to make that happen. They also do a lot in the subsidy, both in the front end incentive and in the school subsidy, to make it a lot easier to manage as a community and to be willing to accommodate. and it makes the process more smooth and more possible. It still has to, that district would have to be established, of course, and we would still have to have control and go through a very long process, but it would be predictable with a high likelihood of success. So that's the quick and dirty version of what we're looking at, what the mechanics are. I'm happy to field questions, but again, want to respect the time of the
Any
evening.
questions for Mr. DeFranza? Your Honor.
Just to kind of put a wrap on the presentation, you've heard me say this, and we've been working with Andrew and his team for over a year on this, recognizing that we have a regional need at certain income levels and populations who find it challenging to be in stable housing, types of housing that's challenging to site. We're working hard with Mayors Driscoll and Betancourt and Town Manager Bartha and Salem, Peabody, and Danvers, and I think we're close to a regional memorandum of understanding, and where we commit to do this together. And this is an opportunity for us to provide family housing for some of the lowest income families, and as Andrew said, families who are at risk of or currently homeless, as well as some more workforce level type of income housing, and do it in a way that really works within our community.
Yeah, this idea is springing out of that regional format. And I think that's part of what makes it even more compelling. The individual project is really a manifestation of this regional idea, which is unique across the state and hopefully will be a model.
Lorinda?
My question is maybe for Aaron, maybe for the mayor. 40S, is the state reimbursing on the amount we actually spend per student, or the amount that the state says we should get per student, which is not nearly enough?
So it's basically based on what the difference between what we're spending and what the additional cost is, right? So we have the additional revenue that's generated from the smart growth projects. So tax revenue, excise taxes are brought into that equation, and then how much we're receiving from Chapter 70 per head per pupil. And then you take what we're spending on average per pupil, and whatever that difference is what we get from 40S.
Thank you.
Matthew?
Yeah, for Aaron, I know we just funded a comprehensive housing plan to be developed. What is the status of that?
Sure, we actually just kicked off our first meeting with the consulting firm, which is Karen Sonnenberg and Abacus Architecture and Planning. We're hoping to have the needs analysis portion of that plan done by June, which will give us a real sense of what are the needs in terms of the different housing types and housing profiles. So families, seniors, people at certain income levels, lower than 30 AMI, 60 or 80. And then as part of our planning process, what we're really looking for is housing up to and beyond the market rate. So we're not just looking at middle income, I shouldn't say beyond market rate, but middle income and above that, so up to the 120%.
Is your plan to wait until the results of that come in, or do you feel like this is something that is going to be needed regardless?
I think we've identified through the task force process over the last year and a half that there's a deep need for this. We know that there's a need for not just the supportive housing for homeless families in this case. There's also a deep need for housing for families generally in the region. So we know that there's a need for it. What we hope to find in the housing plan is exactly what are the housing types and what are the profiles that we need to be thinking about going forward. So we've talked, as an example, we've talked a lot about senior housing. Is that something that we need? We know we have changing demographics. We're an aging population. But we want to know exactly what that means in the context of our housing, our current housing stock, and in-migration and out-migration of populations. So, that's just an aspect we want to look at going forward. And it will certainly the plan will talk about all of those.
Thank you.
We don't plan on waiting to move forward. As soon as Harbor Light gets site control, we would expect to move the rezoning process quickly. And I can give you, it's not a quick process because it takes state approval. A zoning process, which may normally take 5 to 6 months locally, will take a year to 18 months. And if you like, I can go through it. It's rather uninteresting, but I can go through that detail if you want.
It'll take a while.
Yeah.
Paul?
I have a question for Mr. DeFranza. For a project this size, is there any estimate on how many students this might generate?
As a matter of fact, there is. It's an excellent question. So there are, it was one of the major questions that drove the bedroom layout. So originally we had more multi-bedroom units, and this was sort of the balance as we were trying to manage what that would be and when. So what two issues there. One, I think, is that this project would not get built provided we're successful until after the middle school's done. Where hopefully I'll have one of the first 5th graders and first 7th graders. So I'm pretty excited about that. So there's a timing issue there, and that was important, I think, in the planning, that we made sure we were going to have space as a district. And so the way then that we tried to back into what the number was we took, there was a report that came out that had data that was not local. And that had a certain number to it. And then the mayor was seeking some more local data, and so we took our data, the Beverly Housing Authority's data, the YMCA's data on like units financed that way, how many kids there were real time local, and so and multiplied that by the amount of multi-bedroom units there were. Short answer was it's between 57 and 67, depending on how you calculate it, whether you use a straight average or a weighted average. So the two dominant issues then were we think it's between 57 and 67 based on very local data, and we're certain that the project would get built after the middle school is done, which would have the impact of the 5th graders moving and the rest of the role that you would know more about than I would. So,
thank you.
Is that helpful?
Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
Anybody else?
Something real.
Yes, of
very
course,
quick.
Jason.
Thank you. Mr. DeFranza, can you speak to a little more details on what the homeless housing will actually look like and mean in terms of, will there be supportive services? Will it be on site? How will that all work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, there's a technical reference. It's called permanent supportive housing. The idea generally is that you combine affordability of residential space that's stable and high quality and services that are relevant to that population on site. That's essentially, it's not too tricky, but it's taken us a long time to get used to as an industry, as a society. So the idea here is that there would be 12 of the 61 that would be set aside for homeless families, which is just about enough to create enough scale to have case management available physically on site. So you'd have property manager physically on site, and you'd have a case manager also physically on site who would be available to help facilitate the independence and the ongoing independence of those 12 households. 12 is a little tight, for that, but that's where we were landed on unit total. And there's some financing restrictions from the state as to how many of those units you could and couldn't do. So 12 is the number we landed on. We're doing pretty much the exact same thing out of the same regional approach in Salem, on Boston Street for individuals. Same idea, same design, property manager on site, case manager on site. So the idea there with that is you're providing the services those families are going to need, and their access to other services that would happen outside of the building, but you're providing that conduit right there, right in the building. It's not so different in some ways than what we do in senior housing. Like at Turtle Creek, we have case service coordinators right on site. The population needs are different. The outcomes are different, but it's the same general idea. How do you help a population that needs the affordability and some extra services to maintain their housing? How do you help them access whatever it happens to be? In a homeless family's case, it's going to be job training, childcare, transportation, etc. And that person on that site will help them access those things, which will in turn facilitate their ongoing independence. So it's not, to be fair, this is not a model we made up, so we're not that smart. It's a good model, but we're borrowing it heavily from other people.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
You bet.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, Mr. DeFranza, just to follow up on that, although the population may be somewhat different and the services delivered somewhat different, this sounds like it would be very similar to what you have right at the corner of Cabot and Elliott Street, where the old Mayflower Hotel used to be, right?
Almost, except I do not have it. So as delighted as I would be to peer into President Guanxi's windows all the time, that's not my. That would be the YMCA and the North Shore CDC.
But the same basic kind of model, on-site services provided for the population that is there and so forth.
Yeah, there's a nuance in that the service model is slightly has a different level of integration and some different dynamics to it, but yes, it would be similar. You have individuals mainly at that building and not families, and the service model is usually partnered in there with somebody else. But it's a similar idea.
I just mentioned just to give people sort of a concrete sort of sense of what that might mean, what it might look like, and how it integrates into a neighborhood and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, in this case, it's sort of unique physically where that building is, in that there's no single family neighborhood right there. You got commercial heavy to the left, public housing sort of across the street and the other way, and obviously the school. So it's a little interesting in the integration, how you integrate it. In some ways, the school is the biggest neighbor, the high school. But yes, that would be a good example of a like project with some twists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, gentlemen.
Delighted. Nice to see everybody. Thank you again.
Great to see you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Aaron. Would you
Okay.
like to introduce the
Sure.
superintendent?
And finally, Dr. Hershey is going to come back to the podium and take us home and talk about technology in the city and schools.
Making me go back to the podium. It'd be briefer if I was sitting. I'm only kidding. So, as we were taking a look at this past year, we actually had a retirement in the school department in January. That retirement was Paul Cohen. Paul was the hardware networking backbone of our technology. So it created an opportunity, and that opportunity was for us to have a conversation with the mayor and the mayor's office about the possibility of consolidation. We work at the lower level together all the time, but it may make sense for us to have a single CTO for the city and schools, and then be able to take a look at that from the standpoint of, does it create greater efficiency? What are the benefits of doing it that way? We both have a need to be better planned and strategically planned to ensure that as we make purchases or as we utilize city dollars, we're using it in a way that will be robust for a longer period of time. So making those decisions. And also to take a look at the talent that we have between the city and schools and distribute that talent based on issues and problems as opposed to where we are right now, who you work for. And it makes sense for us to utilize that talent in a different way. So we looked at it from a two-tier standpoint, and the first tier is to do an assessment. Both of us felt that on city side and school side, we need to do an assessment of where we are, what our infrastructures look like. Are they robust enough to handle the future? We are on school side increasing the use in the classroom exponentially. So we are a 24/7 organization right now, and we have to be robust and we have to be up and running all the time. So that's changing pretty dramatically as teachers engage more and more in using technology in the classroom. City's running into the same issues. So the assessment would gauge what our infrastructure looks like, where our holes are, where recommendations would be that we have to make improvements in what we have. The second piece is to do an assessment of the personnel that we have working in IT on both schools and cities, and determine whether we have the skills and whether it would be better to deploy the skills in a different way than we're deploying them right now. And then in addition to that, they will be making some recommendations around what makes sense to outsource. So frequently schools and city have chief cook and bottle washers. And so what happens is you have people that don't have the expertise to deal with a major situation that happens once every year. And so that kind of situation might be better handled by doing outsourcing because it's not going to come in often, and you want the greater expertise coming in to be able to handle those situations. So we're close to being able to come up with a firm that would be able to do the assessment. The assessment will take about a month. And then after that, we will have an insight as to whether consolidation makes sense and is it the way we should be going, and what should that look like as we move forward? I know on our side, I always use the example of city installed a fiber optic network on the school side. We had no plan to implement voice over IP phones across the district. So we have 2 buildings with voice over IP, and we have no other buildings with voice over IP. And so that causes problems. Just from the standpoint of police and fire, they can't tap into any cameras that we have. There's no ability to do the kinds of things that voice over IP would provide. And it's just that we didn't have someone thinking about the plan as the fiber was coming in. So we want to make sure that those kinds of opportunities are done well. The other piece is making sure that we are sizing our pipeline coming in to be right-sized, as opposed to shutting some stuff down because we don't have the capacity or the speed of our network to be able to handle what we're dealing with. And we were definitely doing that on school side. So the lack of use of YouTube in the classroom, and there's more and more free content on YouTube that's quality for teachers to be able to use. We couldn't use it because if in fact we had YouTube up and running in too many classrooms, the whole system would slow down, and so therefore we'd have problems. So we want to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot from the standpoint of what makes sense for use of instruction in the classroom. So it's an ongoing project right now. It looks like it's going to make sense, but we'll have a better handle once we get done with the assessment.
Any questions for Dr. Hershey?
Questions?
Nice to go last.
No.
Oh, first and last, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hershey.
Does anybody have anything to add before we ask for a motion to adjourn? Your Honor, anything? All right. President Silverstein, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, motion carries a bunch to nothing. Thanks again for watching at home. Great meeting, everyone.
9:04 p.m.